Hi, I'm Father David. Welcome to Friar Time. Immigration. It's not just a policy debate, it's a human one. It's the face of a mother crossing the desert with a child in her arms. It's the fear of a father being taken from his home. It's also the voice of a struggling worker, afraid laborers willing to accept a lesser salary will cost him or her everything. It's the cry of a nation trying to protect its borders and its cultural soul. Today on Friar Time, we're not taking sides, we're asking some hard questions. Can a country uphold its laws and its compassion? Is there room in our politics for mercy? Let's talk honestly about immigration, the fears, the facts, and the faith that calls us to more. This is Friar Time, so let's start talking. Today we want to welcome Father Julian. You've been working with migrants and the immigration situation for quite some time. So tell us a little about your work, Julian.
Actually, I did this immigration work for 12 years for the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. And the latest project that we did was ASAP, which stands for Asylum Seekers Assistance Project, which ran for 20 months from 2022 until 2025. Uh, at the height of our project, we've helped more than 3,000 asylum
Wow,
seekers.
it's amazing.
And I had not only staff, but also 120 volunteers. And quite honestly, we had a great time helping our brothers and sisters for the asylum applications.
That's great. Wonderful. So let's begin with the emotional climate
Mhm.
around this issue. When people hear the word immigration, it sparks strong emotions. Why do you think this issue touches such a deep nerve, not just in American society, but other societies? And why is it so hard to talk about immigration without either being labeled un American or unchristian? And has fear hijacked this conversation, you think?
Absolutely. Uh, I'd say immigration has been a very polarizing issue. There are those on one side who are afraid and suspicious of the newcomers. And on the other hand, there are those who are confident that these migrants will contribute something to the growth of the country. But I would say for those who are afraid or suspicious of the newcomers, to dig deeper into what makes them afraid or suspicious of the newcomers or the others. And if we go deeper into their fears or suspicions, it's all about, othering the others, not being welcoming, you know. You
Where
know,
do you think the fear comes from?
well, it comes from a fear of they're going to take our resources, they're going to take our jobs, they're going to invade our neighborhoods. But these are all myths, unfounded accusations. And we believe that this country was built by immigrants for immigrants. And we're hoping and we're confident that these newcomers will also be on the same boat with us, helping to build this country.
Let's look for a minute at the moral and the theological challenges that this issue also faces. So, from a Franciscan and a gospel perspective, welcoming the stranger is moral imperative. But how do we balance that with a nation's right to control its borders, ensure its security?
I absolutely agree that we should guard, strengthen security at our borders, but we should also be, at the same time, be welcoming of those who knock at our doors. We cannot be naive and say, ignore our laws, but hopefully our laws are humane enough to welcome those who need our help.
So, Julian, what role should the church play in this debate?
That we will continue to accompany these migrants and asylum seekers. Just what we did with ASAP. There were a couple of days back in January of 2023 wherein more than 300 migrants and asylum seekers showed up at the doors of the church, you know, and some of them even started lining up the night before.
Now, where were these migrants from? Were these
They're
from the South?
they're from Latin America and they're from West Africa. And at the time, we offered our services in four languages: Spanish, French, Arabic, Wolof, and Fulor. These are the dialects that are being spoken in West Africa.
Wow.
Okay? So just with a massive number of immigrants and asylum seekers came to St. Francis of Assisi Church at the Migrant Center. Why? There are two things, I would say, two selling things, for the Migrant Center at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. Number one, we offered our services for free, absolutely free. We also provided them rather with clothing and food. And with that, I would like to thank our volunteers and our sponsors who helped us fund the project. And number two, since we are a church, immigrants are always confident that the church will be there, that this is a safe space for them, that they can trust us. We are not going to turn them in, that we are going to help them, accompany them, and provide for their immigration needs. And that was a great project.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. I know that you've heard some countless personal stories, stories from migrants, some heartbreaking and some hopeful. So many immigrants come fleeing violence, we know that, poverty, persecution. What do you see in their stories that oftentimes the general public, all of us, really might overlook?
The humanness of their search or their journey. But I think we should also ask the question, you know, why they're here, why they come to us. It's because we were there in their countries. And I think a hard question to ask is, why is America rich and other countries are poor? So of course we are rich and they would come here to seek a better life for themselves and their families. But I think when we talk about immigration, we should not separate it from hard facts like poverty, persecution in their countries. And to ask the question, what is our role as a country, America, in their own sufferings in their own countries?
So you're saying that we might be part of the reason why they're coming here.
Absolutely.
How is that? Tell me how that
Well,
works.
I think to answer that question is we have to ask ourselves, how did we enrich ourselves? Did we not enrich ourselves at the expense of other countries? I think we have to talk about our foreign policies. What are we doing in other countries? So
Hmm.
of course we enrich ourselves, and so we became attractive to people from countries that are poor. Here is America, land of opportunities.
In a way, that's not so different from the 1800s, 1900s, when Italians came, the Irish came. A lot of immigrants came here, not maybe so much for the persecution, but also for a better life for them and their families.
I think one of the things that we have to understand that immigrants, of course, there are always, I would say, questionable elements that enter our country, and we should not be naive to ignore that. But we should always stand on the grounds that these immigrants are here seeking a better life for themselves and their families, and in the process, contribute to the growth of this country.
Now, I think this is important. So let's be honest. Some Americans say immigrants are a burden on jobs, on schools, on public services. So, are we ignoring the economic facts? And are there real strains on our country? Is it straining our own society to bring them in?
We should not ignore hard facts here. In the past 3 years, there had been a massive influx of immigrants into this country. Um, in New York City alone, the last count was 250,000 migrants and asylum seekers that arrived in New York City. And we saw on the news, a newspaper, how the city of New York was overwhelmed.
Correct.
But the question is, you know, if we allow these immigrants to work, pay taxes, you know, I would say there will be beneficial to the economy of this country and to the city. But of course, I would say there always be a loophole in all those things. It's not always a perfect picture, but you know, I'd say
Right, and there are I know from some of the reading that I've done, there are a lot of jobs and things, such as in the fruit growing states in the South, where migrants are an integral part of the growth in terms of picking the fruit, and
yes.
they always say that in a lot of ways Americans would not do those jobs that many migrants do.
Well, that's why that myth that migrants are taking away our jobs are just myth. It's a myth. Like who would work a farm worker's job for $5 an hour and in the heat of the sun?
Yeah,
And we still have to see one American who said an immigrant stole my job as a busboy in the restaurant,
hmm
as a food delivery person. These are all negative publicity against
Well,
immigrants.
well, speaking of myths, then, and there's certainly no shortage of myths on both sides of this discussion. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered, both from people who support more open immigration and from those who want stricter policies?
From the ones who want stricter policies, and those who are afraid of these newcomers, the misconception is that we have an open border that anybody just can walk in. That is not true. They're vetted, they're being inspected at the border before they enter into the country. But of course, there's no such thing as a perfect system
Right,
here. There will always be some bad elements that would come in. But we should not lose sight of the fact that they're here, our brothers and sisters. They're here to contribute to the growth of this country. Not all of them are bad
right,
people.
of
So
course.
that's one myth there. And of course, the biggest one is they're here to take away our jobs. They're invading our community. They are polluting our culture. I mean, what is this? Polluting our culture. From a Christian Franciscan perspective, there's no such thing as invasion. They're not invading our country.
Some of the research that I've done has said that those same accusations were leveled against the Irish, against the Italians, against the Germans when they came to this country too, in the sense of taking our jobs. Or the famous signs here in New York City, Irish need not apply. Those kinds of, or the derogative names they had for the immigrants coming in at that time. So we've seen a lot of harsh images then, and we're seeing even, it seems like more harsh images now. We've seen families separated, children in detention. And so critics of the current immigration enforcement say it's cruel and it's dehumanizing, essentially, especially to families and to children. So, what would a true moral system of immigration that satisfies both these sides, what would it look like to you?
Well, first of all, we need to reform our immigration system. You know, they describe it as a broken immigration system. I would say to reform it is to make it more humane and sensitive to immigrants' needs and concrete situations.
Hmm
For example, family reunification. When you petition your family abroad, depending on the country where you came from, sometimes it would take 10 to 20 years waiting. In some cases, uh, the people that are being petitioned are long gone before even their case are approved.
Yeah.
There's a case of DACA, young people who came to this country as children. They're in a limbo now. Why can't the government provide them a pathway to citizenship? Get jobs, pay taxes, contribute to the growth of this country.
Let's talk a little about DACA for a minute. Could you explain to our viewers what DACA actually is?
DACA stands for Deferred Action for Early Arrival for those children who came to this country young as youngsters or children.
Who had no choice about coming?
Yes, They were brought to the country in some ways unlawfully. Others, they came with a visa as tourists. They overstayed, but this is the only country that they know of, and they grew here, and there's no way to send them back where they came from. So they are now young adults. Some of them are married with families, homes, and jobs, but their status is uncertain. They, they have what we call as DACA status, which is temporary.
So these are people who maybe they were brought here at 3 years old, 4 years old, maybe a little older. So they had no choice in coming here. Their parents or somebody brought them here. So they've grown up in the United States. This is the country that they know. And so they have families, as you say. So, but they're not permanent residents here.
They're not permanent
So
residents.
they could be deported at any time.
With DACA, they cannot be deported and they can find legal employment. But the DACA situation has not been adjudicated, and we don't know what the future is of their status. There are some rumors that it might be abolished. So when you abolish that, what would happen to more than 800,000 DACA people?
Let's talk now about one of the most charged narratives, and it's some people say this is not this is black and white, this issue. Okay, so some would argue that undocumented immigrants essentially are breaking the law, and they should be held accountable. We hear this word invasion is being used at the border, but what's the truth behind who's coming and why are they coming? And what are they actually looking for here? So there's kind of two issues here. We understand the human side of this, people coming for a better life, fleeing persecution for whatever reason. Um, so they come here, maybe illegally. They're breaking the law. Now what?
Okay. Uh, we have to be honest about this, okay? There are those who were vetted and entered the country legally. Okay. And there are those who slipped into the country
Right.
in some unlawful ways. And I have been to the border many times. And those who work at the border, they would point out to me that, okay, here's a tunnel that goes to the country. And these are what I would say illegal entries into the country. Uh, Breaking the law, that's true, but not all of those who enter the country entered illegally. You know, there are those who came in legally too. So those who entered the country are those the ones that needed probably, assistance and apprehension, you know, uh,
The ones who came in legally.
illegally.
Legally.
The ones who came legally, of course, hopefully they'll find,
Right.
they will be resettled in the country.
What about the ones who came in illegally?
There is the hard truth about this is that we don't have concrete data about them because they entered illegally. So when they'll be apprehended, then since they broke the law, then they'll have to be answerable to our laws.
So should be deported. If they come in here illegally, they should be
Okay.
deported?
They, we have to take it case by case. Not all of them are deportable. Some of them need assistance, but the thing is, they entered in a non-conventional way, if you would put it.
Well, okay. So we're trying to be as honest here as possible. So non-conventional way means illegally. Is that correct?
Okay, by
So
law, they entered illegally.
illegally, therefore they should be deported.
They should be apprehended and be processed, not be deported right away, in my opinion.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well,
Why?
they have to investigate, their reasons for coming. Uh, they could be facing a possible fear of persecution or
Yep.
even death if they will be uh, uh, shipped back, deported back to the country. Uh, yeah. But of course, absolutely, we have to uphold the law. but hopefully upholding the law, we do it in a more humane and Christian way.
But with this issue, you can see why there are people who are saying, but they broke the law. Now, that's a rather black and white way of looking at it when we're dealing with human lives. But you can see on that side of the coin when somebody says, well, they broke the law, therefore they have to be deported. So you can see on that side, if I have a mentality that's very black and white, the law is the law, then that's where those people are coming from.
I am not discounting the fact that there's a law that they violated, but I'm hoping that the enforcement of this law, that refers to illegal entry, would be more humane and
Uh-huh.
you know.
Right. And then, as coming from that, then you see that there's the system itself. As you mentioned, long waits, complex rules. So some feel that the immigration system, as we spoke about, is broken, not just in terms of enforcing the system, but I mean, how long and how difficult is it to even enter legally into this country? What changes would you propose for something like that?
Well, the so-called or the most popular suggestion in how to deal with this is to overhaul our immigration system,
The whole system.
the whole system. Revisit our laws and cut down the waiting time and put more qualifications for migrants, provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA and others who are qualified. And to talk about it honestly, I would say, you know, stricter border policies, but at the same time, help those who are already here rather than deport them.
Right.
We have a big number of undocumented immigrants in this country. The last count was 11.7 something like million. And could you imagine if these immigrants are given a chance to work legally? How much can they contribute to the economy of this country?
Yeah.
But the problem is we've criminalized and capitalized immigration. You know,
So in all of this, all of these multi issues, okay, we have two men who have spoken out. One is Pope Francis, who is very much in terms of helping migrants move and open arms, taking care of them, almost echoing the Statue of Liberty right here in New York Harbor. Now, in his passing, we have Pope Leo, who has exactly pretty much the same stance in terms of migrants. So, given the fact that these two men, who are the Pope of a huge Catholic church, as well as very outspoken Christian men of opinion, what role should the church play in this debate? I think that should we be advocating for a policy? Should we be offering sanctuary, or just caring for whoever shows up at our door?
it's a very it's a multi-layered question. Let me start by saying this: if the gospel and our Franciscan values compel us to welcome immigrants unconditionally, meaning it's an imperative, that means that the gospel and our Franciscan values are for the poor immigrants. Therefore, we have to stand with them in solidarity. As Pope Francis said, welcome, promote, integrate, these immigrants into our country. Uh, I would say we should be doing that. Therefore, we should be involved in advocacy for policy changes. That we should, offer sanctuaries in cases that needed them. And the most important thing is accompany them, be with them, especially in their needs for legal assistance and their need to be cleared legally.
I know that recently you mentioned sanctuary. So I know that recently this administration of our government has said that where churches were kind of like off target, so that migrants could take sanctuary in churches, which I think is something that's like a tradition in the
That
church.
is not the case anymore.
Right. So that's been dropped now.
In the previous administrations, Obama, Biden administrations, there was a standing policy that immigration agents or ICE are not allowed in schools, hospitals, and churches. But of course, under this present administration, we don't have a report of a raid that was conducted in a church or school or hospitals. We need yet have to see that happening
Uh-huh.
to really say that, well, he changes entire policies. But as a church, as friars, as people of faith, we should be in the side of the poor immigrants.
Let's look at one of the things right now, in terms of, so we have all this discussion about immigration, but what exactly is happening right now, like today at the border?
At the border right now, very few people, or absolutely almost nothing, nobody is allowed to enter.
So the border's shut down.
The border is closed. So it's not, we cannot say that we have an open border.
Is the border closed just from United States to Mexico, or also in Canada to the United States?
We haven't heard about Canada. I think Canada is open, but the latest report that I heard, that I got, I received actually from our friars in San Antonio, it said the port of entries are closed.
So no one can come from through Mexico
Very
into the United
few
States.
people, a handful, are allowed that are vetted to enter the country, but practically all ports of entry are closed.
So if someone arrives is trying to get through illegally, how does that happen?
Well, the illegal entry is somehow uncontrollable because they sneak into the country. But of course, our border patrol are always actively on the lookout for illegal entry. There are still some, I believe, but
No,
since
you mentioned tunnels and other ways of coming through.
I was in Juarez at one point, and I went to visit a convent of the nuns there. And one of the nuns pointed out to me and said, "Father, look at that house with a red roof." I said, "What about it?" There's a tunnel there that goes to the US, and it's only one of hundreds here. And then months later, that came out in the news that they've discovered a tunnel from the Mexican border to the US.
And they came up through the house.
Yes. But the question is this, when when something like that happens, we should ask why. Why would people prefer to enter the country illegally than go through the proper channel? Why?
Why? Let me ask the question. Why?
Because of our stringent laws, and I think that's a work that has to be done on the other side of the border to help immigrants understand the process of coming into the country.
To prepare them.
Yep. And we have to understand also on the other side that it's a big business for the coyotes, the cartel.
Okay, explain that to our viewers. What's a coyote example?
So coyote are people who help these immigrants enter the country unlawfully. Of course, we know the cartels are, drug cartels who again uses migrants as, in some cases, who enter the country illegally as drug couriers.
So a coyote is paid to bring somebody in illegally.
Yes, it would cost between $300 to $1,000 to $1,500 for coyotes to walk the migrants through the desert or to tunnels or other unlawful means of entering the country.
Many of our viewers may be wrestling with this question. So, Julian, what's your message to someone who's torn? Someone who wants to be compassionate. They want to follow what they feel is the gospel. But they also really want to protect this country and our borders and their community?
I would say, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to welcome the strangers in our midst. You know, they're just like us, human beings with their needs. We should be more compassionate and welcoming of them. Of course, when I say that, we are not being naive that there are bad things that are happening in our countries, in our country. There are things committed, crimes committed by immigrants, but that should not color or categorize or put in a box all immigrants. Some of them are good, you know, good people seeking a better life for themselves and in their families. And, you know, like any immigrants, they want to achieve their American dream. And in doing so, I strongly believe that they could be an asset to our economy and to our country and to our church.
On behalf of our viewers, I want to thank you, Father Julian, for your great insights in helping us better understand what is happening with immigration in our country. Immigration is not just a political issue, it's a human dilemma. We've heard the arguments for stronger borders. We've seen the desperate faces of those who risk everything to cross these borders. There are real fears about safety, about jobs, and about cultural identity. And there are real people who are fleeing war, poverty, persecution, and they're praying for a chance to live a dignified and a happy life here in the United States. Some call for justice, while others cry for mercy. And maybe what we need is both. Here on Friar Time, we believe the gospel calls us to engage, not to escape, to listen with open hearts, even when we disagree, because how we treat the stranger among us reveals who we truly are. Thank you for joining us. I'm Father David, and this has been Friar Time. For immigration assistance with legal issues and employment opportunities, please reach out to www.cliniclegal.org.